Okay, you need a little bit of a background on artificial intelligence, especially here. I'm recording this at the beginning of 2024, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future with this. So you should be aware. Anyway, I want you to know that this is not the same lecture that you'd get from another teacher because I teach both a heavy subject that involves a lot of research, a lot of writing in the social sciences, and then I also teach computer science. You're going to get a different background on this than you would from most other teachers. Now, let's start with a simple definition. What is AI? What is artificial intelligence? The technical definition is using a computer to mimic human intelligence. Anytime you use a computer to substitute for something that it would be a human's thought process. So we tend to think of this as extremely recent, but they started research into this in the 50s, and the idea behind it is even older. The goal of having some kind of artificial intelligence. The goal, of course, is to create a generalized intelligence that can completely replace human thought and do whatever you want. We are not there. And some scientists wonder if we can even get there, but we'll see what happens. Instead, we're at a point where we're talking about things like ChatGPT, things like Google's Bard, and those are what's called large language models. And I'm going to go through and explain how they're made so that you can know the background of how to use it effectively. And that's the goal for today, that you understand some of the benefits and the limits of using this technology. So let's start. It's called a large language model. I used the acronym LLM. So a large language model, what is that? If we're talking about ChatGPT or Google Bard, some people call them chatbots. That's not a great term for them because they're much more powerful than a simple chatbot. So this is a good visualization of how LLMs are trained. Now understand, of course, that I'm giving you the kind of simple version of this. But they do either what's called next token prediction, which is where they give it words and they try to predict the next word. So they give it Hannah is a, and then they say what goes in the space. And eventually they learn to fill in the blank with the most likely space. They do the same thing with masked language modeling. Jacob and is what reading. And it could be any of these, and it learns to find the context from what's going on around it. When that's done, they opened up the beta and they let people kind of interact with it and give it either yes, that's right, or no, that's wrong. It really is in some ways similar to the way that you would train a dog. Hey, that's good, good boy, here's a treat. And so you say, hey, this is correct, this is not correct, this is what's wrong with it, this is what's right with it. And so it has some human training in there. Now, because they generate based on the most likely next word, they don't always generate accurately. And we're going to talk about that in this next bit. What are the consequences of the way that it's made? What are the costs of this? For starters, the way that it's trained introduces training biases. So I'm going to give you an example of a different thing that was trained. This was a chatbot. It was called Tay. Microsoft had this cool idea. It's an AI that could go on to Twitter and it would learn from the people it interacted with. And so it went on and it would respond to you and had all these conversations. Tay lasted less than 24 hours. So this was March 23rd, 2016. Because of the training data, because it was on Twitter, by the end of the 24 hours, Tay was so racist that they didn't want to leave it online any longer. So they learned a lot from this. They learned a lot of things, but one of the things we learn from it is that there are biases based on the training data you put in. You train it on Twitter or X, which is just garbage, and it's going to be garbage. Like that's what it was. So I asked ChatGPT to illustrate this. I teach an American history course, and I was like, hey, what would this tell me to cover? And would it be useful? Incidentally, it was not useful at all. I didn't use it. So here's the last bits of the response that it gave me. And here's the thing. I've highlighted it's turned purple as I've changed things, but I put blue the ones that were things that the Democrats would want covered, and I put things in red that were really things the Republicans would want covered, and then I left black things that were just neutral. And so you see, um, Bush isn't even mentioned by names. And then there's also debatable things here, like the Great Recession is on there. I'd say that started in 2008. I wouldn't give it 2007. But we could debate that in real history stuff. So why is ChatGPT biased like this? Is Google Bard biased the same way as whatever Yes, they're all biased the same way because they essentially use the internet as their training data. Now, that's not the only problem. Once they open it up to human feedback, so this is what OpenAI, they're the people that made ChatGPT, their CEO, Sam Altman, said, the bias that I'm scared of isn't the training bias as much as I'm nervous about the human feedback rate. What happens when humans give it wrong answers? It's going to think that those are right. This is why your stupid phone always tries to make you pluralize proper names with apostrophes instead of do it right, like just add an S or an ES, because people have told it that that's correct over and over and over. So I just have some pictures here that are illustrations of how sometimes people aren't that knowledgeable. So that's the first thing, is that it has its own biases. The second problem that comes from the way it's trained is we can find it in the story of Stephen Schwartz. Schwartz was a lawyer. And so he decided one day he'd use this new tool, this ChatGPT, to write one of his court briefs for him. The problem is that they create the most likely next word. But what if the most likely next word is incorrect? So they call this AI hallucinations. AIs will make up data. They'll make up information. They are especially good at making up references, because they'll make up references that sound right but aren't right. That's why I get asked by students sometimes, can I get an AI to summarize this article for me? You can get a good summary, but you can't get good research from it, because it will tell you something is on a certain page and it is not on that page. In fact, it's not on any pages. It made it up. And a lot of experts wonder if it's even possible to um, train it so that it doesn't do this. They think it might be just inherent in large language models that they hallucinate. And if you ask them, by the way, if you type into ChatGPT, do you hallucinate? It'll tell you it doesn't. But then there's a little warning at the bottom that essentially says, I make stuff up. Don't trust me for everything here. So Stephen Schwartz, he posts this thing, or he gives this thing to the judge that he had ChatGPT make, and it had made up court cases that looked believable. Well, the judge was not impressed. And in the end, he had to come back in. He did not lose his law license. He did not get fired. But I mean, those things could have happened to him, and they'd probably happen to the next person. So be careful. Be careful because of this. So UC Berkeley computer science professor Stuart Russell is one of the world's foremost experts on AI. And in May 2023, he said, lots of people come to me and they say, hey, I own a business. I want to replace some of my workers with AI, or I want to use this AI. And what he said is this. He said, anywhere you currently use a psychotic 6-year-old who lives in a fantasy world, sure, go ahead and replace that 6-year-old with a large language model. So, are they useful? Absolutely. I will show you some of the ways that they're useful. But are they a replacement for thought? Absolutely not. So I have some just kind of important notes for you. First, why do we care? Who cares if you write this thing with an AI? If you decide to use an AI to write your paper? Well, the reason we care is because you're learning skills. So this person claimed to be an expert in AI and teaching, and I don't think they were an expert in either, because they said, they're like, oh, well, we don't need to teach essays anymore. It's an outdated skill. And it just isn't, because the skills that writing essays teaches is how to find information, how to organize the information, and how to think it through, whether your information allows you to come to a logical conclusion. I would argue that we don't want a computer doing that thinking for us. That having a computer do that thinking for us is actually a travesty and something that we as a society can't afford. So that's it. So let me be blunt. If that doesn't convince you, if you are like, I don't care, I don't have to think about anything, then why are you in upper division classes? But let me be really blunt. If you use an AI to do your work for you, that's absolutely cheating, because you're not doing the work. It doesn't matter if it's plagiarism or not plagiarism, you're not doing the work. Best case scenario, you'll get a 0. Worst case scenario, you'll fail the entire course, depending on how obvious it is, how much you've used it, and whatever. So don't do that. Don't do this. Now, there are totally good ways to use it. I will give you some of those ways and maybe even demo them for you, but I'll do that in a different spot. Okay. Now, I just want to emphasize too, I don't evaluate you with an AI. Like, that's never a thing that I do. I've never liked them. People are like, oh, use Utah Compose. No, it's garbage. So, well, that's about it. That's what I want you to know as background, because we'll use that background moving forward.